Tonight we'll take you inside the struggle to obtain abortion within a community that has suffered the most from anti-choice extremists in their government. I'm talking, of course, about Westeros.
The 2011 death of King Robert Baratheon led to a rise of extremism in Westeros. The result, a series of unnecessary and dangerous abortion restrictions that had clinics closing at alarming rates.
At the beginning of 2010, Westeros had thousands of clinics throughout the Seven Kingdoms. But by 2011, hardliners in the Stormlands, the Iron Islands, and the North imposed harsh decrees requiring abortion providers to dig medically unnecessary moats around their clinics. The prohibitive costs made it impossible to implement, forcing clinics to close, and by the end of 2014, nearly half of the realm was without an abortion provider. This trend continued in the Vale and the Eyrie as rulers in these kingdoms created their own medieval laws, requiring every maester who performs abortion secure admitting privileges at a local hospital. This regulation was nearly impossible to comply with, as hospitals wouldn't be invented for another 7 centuries. But the real crisis came when Cersei Lannister, the disputed Queen of Westeros, enacted a new set of laws so harsh that all but one clinic in the entire kingdom was forced to shut down. I traveled to King's Landing to talk with this complicated queen and find out how she reconciles her autocratic ruling style with her pro-life views.
You murdered your husband's other children, poisoned your rival's daughter, burned your daughter-in-law and dozens of others to death in the fire at the High Sept. You killed a wolf, yet you still call yourself pro-life.
If you go through anyone's past, you're bound to find things that look worse than they are. But where I've always been consistent is my devotion to the unborn subjects.
But what about the born? I mean, you have put so many restrictions on top of already harsh restrictions. You went from a 6-week ban to a 3-week ban to a 1-week ban. You only allow for exceptions in the cases of you.
Yes.
I mean, have you ever felt compassion?
Never.
Did you ever consider exceptions for rape, incest?
No. No exceptions for rape, or incest, or incest, or incest. Look, these are common sense policies to help my unborn subjects. And may I remind you, access to abortion is still legal.
How can you call it access? You force people to build moats. There's a 72-hour waiting period, a 1-week ban.
Like I said, it's still legal. And if you brought anyone in Westeros before me, no one would say that these laws have caused any problem.
Lannister might be quite sure, but we spoke with some of the Queen's born subjects whose experiences don't jibe with her story. Queen Cersei says there's no problem accessing abortion in Westeros. You're all shaking your heads. Melisandre?
Just, wow. I'm from Slaver's Bay. I had to take 3 months off from slavery, scrape up enough money for passage on a ship, sail through the Gulf of Grief, across the Narrow Sea, just to get to King's Landing. Then, once I got to the clinic, I found out Cersei Lannister had passed a law that forced me to wait another 72 hours to think about it.
The Queen claims these laws are to protect you from abortion regret.
Regret? It was because I was able to have an abortion that I could have my wanted demon shadow child when I was ready.
Jon and Dany are worried they might be pregnant, and because of their circumstances, they aren't sure they want to start a family. So they travel to King's Landing to make sure all options would be available to them. You both told me earlier that a pregnancy right now, the timing would be just terrible.
That is an understatement. I had just come back from the dead.
And I am the Willbreaker, the Unburnt, Khaleesi of the Great Grass Sea, breaker of chains, mother of dragons,
And she's my aunt.
And I'm his aunt.
Plus, I'm considering taking the Iron Throne.
Oh. We still have to have a talk about that. Sorry. We're sort of up for the same job.
It's not a good time.
It's not a good time.
What I'm hearing is it's not a good time. So, when your contraception failed...
Actually, we didn't think we needed protection. The witch who performed the abortion while I was trying to resurrect my dying husband told me that I'd never bear children again, so...
And Danny, Melisandre talked about her challenges getting to King's Landing. What was your experience?
My circumstances are different. I'm lucky. I have resources, I have an army, I have dragons. That's not true for everyone. Women of privilege will always be able to get access, no matter what.
These stories of hardship don't end once you finally get to the clinic. As patients enter, they're harassed by hundreds of violent protesters. Yet when I showed the Queen the aggressive hostility happening outside the clinic, she seemed to brush it off.
You call it harassment, I call it sidewalk counseling.
You don't see this as violent?
No.
And what about the subjects? What about the pain they're...
Lies. They're all lying.
But if they are lying, so are the thousands of people who flooded my inbox wanting to be interviewed for this story. And when I went back to my panel to tell them their queen called them liars, they had one response.
Shame.
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 Join the Lady Parts Justice League. Exposing sexist shitheads has never been more rewarding.